again and welcome back. I'll be Adam, and today we're having a little look at Outriders to try and answer one simple question. Is it worth playing in 2023? We're not going to go into any of the technical sides of the systems and all the in-depth guff, because there's already a bajillion videos that have done that, and they're very easy to find. Very easy to find, and I'm not going to try and compete with those. This is a video for like the normal person who's never played this and just wants to drop in, see what it's about, maybe. Especially now it's free on PlayStation Plus Extra as well. So, and it's got fully supported cross-play, so you can play with Xbox players. It was already on Game Pass and on PC. I don't know if it was on anything special on the PC, but you can play with everyone across the board, which is great because it's not a PvP, so there's no real disadvantages of being stuck with a controller. I say stuck with a controller, some people play better on controller now than they do mouse and keyboard. That used to be quite an elitist thing, but that's gone. So, the game has a story, and we'll get to that, but I won't be spoiling any of that today. I've already played through the story. This is the end game stuff, so if you don't see any end game stuff, then maybe don't watch, but there's no story spoilers in it, and I assume most people know there's an end game. So, end game is these things called expeditions, where you can... It's just like one long stage, basically, without as much or... really any story in some cases. They are tied in. They do make out there's a reason that you're doing the things you're doing, but it's neither here nor there. You don't really have to pay any attention to it. So there won't be any major story spoilers. If you do care about that sort of thing, if you want to avoid any sort of endgame stuff, then this video is probably not for you. If you're not worried about that, then why am I still talking? So that's my guy there. He's still at that sort of early awkward phase where you're just wearing whatever armor piece is best. So he looks a little bit stupid, but that's neither here nor there. Let's just get on with the game. And we're in it. This is a sort of hub base at the end of the game. It's just got everything you need. It's all your, like your crafting guy, your storage, your change how you look table. Can't think of words good right now. And multiplayer. Oh, there is multiplayer, obviously. It's only 3 people, which I think is a weird number. I don't know why I think it's a weird number, but it feels like an odd number to me. Anyway, you can have 3 of you going on expeditions and adventures together. You could have done that through the whole storyline, by the way. You can also jump into random people's games. Just join a random team. That's how I have been playing to experience the multiplayer. It has its own set of issues that I'll get to, but I'd recommend this more if you have friends. I'm not saying I don't recommend this game, but I would recommend it a lot more if you have friends. Because I've done a fair bit, like I'm a fair way through it. I'm about third of the way through the original content's endgame. I've not done any of the DLC yet, and I won't. I'll leave that for another video. What we're trying to answer today is just the base game, the free game, worth your time in 2023. These things you'll see here where it says Apocalypse Tier 4, up to Apocalypse Tier 10, but because I'm playing on my own, I've lowered it down a lot, because it's hard to concentrate whilst talking. I'll just seize up and go quiet and start playing the game, and then that benefits no one. I can't make a video out of that, although some people do. Apocalypse tiers are essentially modifiers, so they make the game harder, but at the chance of greater rewards. And the better the reward you get, the harder the tiers you can take on, and that's pretty much it. Very simple concept. It's been in a bunch of other games. I think in the main game they're called world tiers, and it's only when you get to the end it changes to the Apocalypse tier. That was something to do with the DLC. They just added more, as far as I can tell, and more is better, right? Sometimes.
It's bound to have attracted the wrong kind of attention.
Blah 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 blah. Skip story. And we're off, and as you can already see, and you've probably already seen, it's a third-person looter shooter. You probably already knew that, but I felt like I should say it anyway, just in case. There's a cover system, very, very Gears of War. But what's more interesting about this game is the ability system. So if anyone's ever played Paladins, it plays a little bit like that, so you've got 3. And you get to select them from a skill tree that you unlock. Depending on what class you chose, you unlock different things, and then you can load them out differently. And then depending on what equipment you wear as well, it can heavily modify your ability, so you can gear it towards that. Again, there's lots of systems to get into that I'm not going to get into. It's just, is it any fun to shooty bang? And the answer is, honestly, yeah, kinda. My aim was a bit off there. Yeah, it really is. Like, it's fast. It's fast, it's snappy, it's good. It's good on a controller, which was a surprise, because usually the controller settings are a little bit iffy, especially with these kind of games. I didn't need to change anything. They pretty much nailed it straight away, which is it's nice when that happens. Like, there is aim assist, obviously, but it doesn't feel too... I don't feel like it's too hand-holdy, but also it's not like so not there that it makes me feel incompetent for being on a controller. The camera speed is nice. The roll is snappy, all the buttons are snappy, everything, you press a button, the thing happens straight away. The gameplay itself is mostly this. It's like you shoot your way through an arena, you get to the next place, you shoot your way through the arena. So the levels have all been designed around the specific enemies that are going to be in them, which is nice. It does mean there's no real what's the word, roguelite elements, which, for better or worse, some people will love that, some people will hate that. I like it when people go pop. There's some great gore and viscera in this game, so it's fun cycling out the powers. As you can see, the powers abilities cool down fairly quickly, so you can cycle them out really, really fast. In fact, I end up doing more damage with them than I do with the weapons. That, you know, your weapons are almost secondary to your superpowers in this, which is just great amounts of fun. And you can make it so that, you know, you can, like, an explosive ability, and then what I just used there was like a phaser beam ability. I can make it so the phaser beam ability will do more damage after you use the explosion ability, so there's a logic to the order that you cycle them in, or you can make it that way. Again, it just makes it a bit more thinky for a pointy shooty bang. It's I admire any sort of oh fucking hell, this has gone badly. I admire any sort of anything I can mess with, anything that I can put my own stamp on and make my own, you know. I love it. I love the gore. It's done so well. What are you doing, sir? So you'll run into other people with abilities like you, and they're like elites, and they are just much harder to take down. It's best to take down the little ones around them first, otherwise you'll just get overwhelmed. Look like he's doing superpowered things now too. But I've got a massive laser beam that I missed with. Volcano that I didn't miss with, because you can't miss with that. The story's nothing new, but it's all put together really well. There's some nice turns and twists in there that I genuinely didn't see coming. It kept me engaged the whole way through. The characters are all very generic. Like, you've met these kind of people before, but how they grow through their interactions is actually written really well. I would say a downside is the voice acting. Not on all of them, but especially the main character can't speak for the... every time. Never gets old. Never gets old. The voice actor for the male protagonist specifically isn't great. Like, it's noticeably like old Gears of War rip-off type. It's not funny or well written. He's not interesting, but it kind of just doesn't matter. It gets you from A to B, and that's all you really need with a game like this. But I admire the extra effort they went to in terms of the writing, even if they didn't quite nail it in terms of, you know, all the dialogue. If you like a good loot game, this game's really got it. All the weapons, guns, the systems, how quickly they progress, where you... oops, excuse me a second. How quickly you cycle through your guns. There's a lot of games where you stick to a favourite and that's all you'll ever use. This one, like a bit like Borderlands, become obsolete very quickly. So you end up using stuff that you would never usually use just because that's the one with the good power levels. And I like that it does that. It takes me out my comfort zone because I'm a fucker for getting caught up and sticking to what I know and what works. I don't know why I do it because I don't necessarily enjoy it, but I do it every time. So what can I say about the enemies? Well, the AI is pretty spot on, and the stages are built around them, like I said, and you know that comes across. So it feels organic. They feel like they belong. And they've got a fairly good variety and fairly good versions of each sort of enemy, from like the grunts to the bigger ones to the monsters to these guys that are just, you know, duck and cover shooter dudes, grunts if you will. But the story, by the end of it, you've bumped into the same ones a lot, and they do that thing where you'll find one that's got like it's glowing a bit or it's a slightly different colour, and that makes it tougher. And they've been doing that since the days of 8-bit, but back then they had the excuse of they didn't have the, you know, the processing power or the space on the carts to put in the extra stuff, so they just had to change the colour palette, like Mortal Kombat did it quite famously. They didn't need to do it here, but I guess it makes sense because of the different tiers, and every loot game does it. It's not a surprise. But what I would say is, as far as enemy variety goes, it was okay, but by the end of just the main campaign, I was already done with them. Maybe a little bit earlier, like I'd seen enough. I didn't need another version of the same thing, that this one can breathe fire slightly when the other one could breathe ice slightly. Like, it didn't add enough for me. Maybe the DLC did. Maybe there's more enemies in the DLC, and I just haven't seen that yet, which would be nice. I would assume there would be, but for now, just for the main story, they're fine. I wouldn't say it's good. What is there is all really well done, but by the end of the game, you've seen him enough times that you kind of, okay, I know this guy, I know how to handle this guy, and you start to go through the motions a bit, and you don't ever want to really feel that, especially not that early on in a looter shooter, because it's all about repeat gameplay. They don't want you to get bored and, you know, go somewhere else. Oh, quick side note, and just something that most people probably know by now if you do play the game, but again, I didn't until I was at the very end. if you press down on the D-pad, it collects all the loot on the screen. You won't see it in the expedition because you don't get any until the end, but in the main game, loot drops all the time. Just press down on the D-pad if you're playing on controller, and it collects everything. Also, the first time I did an expedition, just another side note, the drop pod at the end, that's what drops all the loot after you've finished, gave me like a ton of legendaries. And then I haven't seen one since. So I don't know if that was obvious baiting is obvious, or I was just really fucking lucky, but I think it's more obvious baiting is obvious. So just be aware that the first time you finish one of these expeditions, you're probably going to get some legendaries, and then after that, they're probably fairly percentage based, like accurately percentage based, based on whatever tier you're playing in, which makes sense. It's just obvious baiting was obvious. So far I've been pretty positive about the game. So does that mean I think it's perfect? No. It's still got a lot of bugs. I did mention bugs earlier, and I said I'd talk about them later. I'm gonna. So in multiplayer specifically, obviously when you're on your own, it's fine. It's not a problem. But in multiplayer specifically, I love how they just turned to ashy skeletons. There's a lot of good stuff in this. A lot of good stuff. Visually, oh yeah, it's a pretty game as well. I haven't even talked about the graphics. I completely forgot because everything else just works so well. Apart from the bugs I'm about to talk to now. If I stop getting distracted, but I probably won't. They are up. So much go on. What did I just say? So yeah, the bugs. I had one repeating one where I kept loading the game up, like to load it into a game, and I could hear my character moving in the background. The loading screen said 100%, but it just never fucked off. It never went away. So I couldn't do anything. I just had to leave out and go back in again. It also has a little problem with so if you drop into someone's game and they're in the hub and they're just not doing anything, someone's AFKing because they've left their game on open, which is really easy to do. Oh, surrounded. Leg it, and laser beams. So yeah, if someone's left their game open, it'll put you in their game, and they'll just be AFKing, or maybe they've just finished an expedition and they're going to be in the menu of the crafting shop for 2 to 3 working days. Well, then you're buggered, because what happened to me plenty of times was I saw what was happening, realised they were AFKing, left the match, went back to find another one, and it put me back in exactly the same place. And the only way I could stop it from happening was by either blocking them, or you can report them. You can say that they were bad partners, bad players, bad people to play with, and sort of downvote them, which you don't want to do, because they've probably just forgot they left their game on open. Like, it's really easy to just forget, especially when you're back at the hub and you're doing your own thing, and you've not got anyone else in your game. Maybe you've just left a match and you played solo. Then you've gone back to the hub on your own, and then someone's dropped into your game, and now you've got people downvoting you because they dropped in afterwards. I don't know. I feel like it wasn't their fault. Another thing that can happen is sometimes your abilities just won't work. They'll go grayed out at the bottom. You'll press the button. It'll just say can't use ability. It won't say why. It happened to me a couple of times where it happened to one ability, and then it happened a few times where it happened to... Good day, sirs. It happened a couple of times where it happened to every ability, and I couldn't get it back. Once or twice when it happened, when it was just 1 or 2 abilities that stopped working, they came back later in the round. But if they all went off, they were off. And the problem is that you use your abilities more than you use your guns, or you do more damage with your abilities more than you use your guns, case in point. So it's a big deal, especially when you're playing with other people and the game's scaling to the fact that there's 3 of you and you can't pull your weight. But you don't want to leave because you might be halfway through or near the end. It happened to me on the last section, like the last arena in a really high level, well, really high level for me, expedition. So I didn't want to quit because I wanted to finish. I'd done the work, I wanted my loot, but I knew I was holding everyone else back, so I was just running around reviving and trying to do as much damage with my machine gun as I possibly could. But it feels crappy and it happens far too often. This guy doing? He's doing his own thing. He's having a great time. He doesn't need me. Is that a boss? That looks like a boss. Some of the creature designs in this are fantastic. Look at that guy. So is it like a deal breaker, any of these problems I've just mentioned? I would say no. If you've got friends, especially no. Because, well, you'll be able to drop in and drop out of matches quicker, you'll be able to explain if something's wrong, you'll be able to, it'll just make everything easier. If you're playing with randoms like I was, it's not so great, because you're stuck. And then if, you lose a match, or you have to drop out of a match, it can be hard to find another one, and then you can have the problem where the game doesn't load, and all these little things can add up. I ended up spending quite a long time at one point just having bad luck after bad luck, and then when I finally did find a match, it was like super low level, and I wasn't getting anything for it, but I was just happy to be able to play with someone, so I didn't want to be, beggars can't be choosers. So if you've got friends, I would 100% recommend this game on just about every level. So for me, would I recommend this in 2023? Absolutely I would. Even if you're playing on your own, I would still recommend it. I would just recommend it harder if you got a couple of friends to play with. Yeah. And that's that. That was good timing, actually. That lined up pretty well. That wasn't intentional. So that was the end of an expedition. So we did the thing. Now we get the things. There's a drop pod that you get at the end. I'll just open real quick, because then you get to see all the loot go poof, and everyone likes a little serotonin of the loot going poof, even if it's not your loot. Blah, 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 blah. If you press down on the D-pad, boop, that's all mine now. So much easier than going around picking everything up individually. I don't know why I didn't find out about that sooner. It was probably on me, but if you don't know that, again, one last time, shout it from the rooftops. It makes everything easier, because you can go through your loot and just delete it appropriately, like very quickly. So just grab everything. Just grab everything. So that's that. Outriders 2023. Fucking play it. Yeah, I really need to figure out a better outro. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.